a child, shackled and shivering in a decaying hut far from any path, abandoned to perish in quietude amidst the snow and dread. No sustenance, no cries left to echo, only a faint whisper, a last exhalation nearly swept away by the wind. And then, at last, a figure emerged through the tempest. 4 legs, a scarred back, eyes vigilant and ready to protect. They labeled him as dead, but Titan, a retired police dog, had more lives to save. What unfolded next will tug at your heartstrings and then mend it, making it stronger than ever. Before we dive in, share your location in the comments. If you agree that no soul, whether animal or human, should ever be abandoned, hit subscribe. This isn't merely a tale. It's a poignant reminder that even in the harshest winter, hope still walks on 4 legs. Cascade County, Washington, had never appeared more picturesque, yet it had never been more perilous. The pine-covered mountains rested quietly beneath a fresh blanket of snow, while the wind sculpted narrow trails between the trunks, as if guided by invisible hands. Temperatures had plunged below zero after 3 straight days of storm, and now as dusk neared the world seemed caught in an eternal breath, still white and watching from the ridge. Above a forgotten gully a shadow moved, 4 legs pushed through knee-high snow drifts slow and sure. The creature was large, its coat once a gleaming saddle of black, and tan now, matted with ice and dirt. His name was Titan, 8 years old, a retired German Shepherd canine unit trained for search and rescue, narcotics detection and protection, but now he wore no badge, no harness, only an old weathered tag half buried beneath his fur, engraved with a name that no longer had a partner to call it. Titan was limping, his left hind leg dragged, slightly a result of the car crash that had supposedly killed him, and his handler, Deputy Alan Kerr. 3 months ago the town had buried Alan. They had assumed Titan died with him. But Titan had survived, thrown from the wreckage into the cold, injured and alone. No one had looked for him, no one cared, but he had followed something deeper than instinct. A bond, a scent, a memory. Now the scent changed fate. Human, young. He paused, ears tilting forward beneath the hiss of wind. Something fragile stirred the air, a whimper. Titan moved. The shack lay half collapsed, its roof caved and leaning like a drunkard against a broken pine. It hadn't been a home in decades. Now it was a prison. Snow blanketed the structure except for a small path freshly carved, as if someone had been dragged. The door creaked in the wind. Titan pushed it open with his shoulder. Inside, darkness pressed close. A damp, foul snow clung to the air, mildew, old wood rope, and something else. Fear. In the far corner, curled up like discarded clothing, was a child. Ethan Bennett was 7 years old, thin, pale. His cheeks were hollowed from hunger, his lips cracked and blue, his light brown hair stuck to his forehead, damp with sweat that had long since cooled. He was dressed simply in a flannel shirt and jeans, lacking a jacket, gloves, or boots. His wrists were bound tightly behind him with rough rope, arms contorted in discomfort. His delicate face quivered in slumber, as though even dreams could not provide a means of escape. Titan approached, his paws silent on the ground. He lowered his head and nudged the boy's cheek. Ethan stirred but remained silent, his eyes still closed. A single tear escaped the corner of his lid, freezing instantly on his skin. Titan sniffed. The boy's scent was recent. Someone had left him here, probably no more than 12 hours ago. But at this temperature, 12 hours could mean the difference between life and death. With practiced precision, Titan positioned his jaws around the rope and began to chew. The rope had stiffened from the cold, but it gave way under the strength of trained teeth when the final strand snapped. Ethan collapsed forward like a marionette with its strings cut. Titan nudged him again. A weak moan. The boy was alive, barely. Titan stepped around and crouched low, offering his back. It wasn't instinct, it was memory. Countless drills, countless rescues, people lifted, children saved. He had done it with Alan. He would do it again. It took several tries, but the boy's limp body eventually slumped over Titan's shoulders. The weight was like to light. The boy hadn't eaten in days. Titan adjusted his stance and pushed out into the storm once more. The wind howled, snow slashed sideways, but Titan did not turn back. He moved through the darkening woods like a myth come to life, silent, purposeful, carrying the weight of one soul. and the ghost of another somewhere in the distance. Headlights flickered behind the trees, then vanished. Watching the snow kept falling, whispering like ash over the forest floor. Titan trudged forward with Ethan's fragile body across his back. Each step sank into powder that reached past the dog's chest, and the cold clawed at his joints, especially Yule. Injury in his rear leg, but Titan didn't stop. The boy's shallow breath tickled the back of his neck, and that was reason enough to keep going. The trail sloped downward, now leading them into a narrow gully bordered by thick stands of pine and spruce. Somewhere ahead, Titan didn't know how far, was a human scent. He remembered faintly a man who had once helped search teens during wildfires and landslides. Not a police officer, not a hunter, but someone who had worn command in his voice. That man lived alone, now nestled between two massive stone outcroppings. The cabin emerged from the landscape like a beacon lost in a sea of white. A chimney protruded from the roof, wisps of smoke ascending into the overcast sky, fading into the gloom. Constructed from robust cedar logs, the structure bore the marks of age and the elements, its surface darkened by years of weathering. One window glimmered orange through frostbitten glass, a beacon of light and warmth, perhaps even safety. Titan arrived at the front porch and released a sharp bark. Inside, Jack Brennan stirred from his chair, a book slipping from his lap onto the hardwood floor. In his late 60s, Jack was tall and solidly built, even beneath the layers of his wool sweater and flannel jacket. His beard, silver but closely trimmed, framed a face that bore the angular tension of a man accustomed to issuing orders with finality. His deep-set gray-green eyes carried the weight of grief, a burden that had aged him beyond his years since the tragic loss of his teenage son in a sudden flash flood. 4 years prior, Jack had retreated from the bustle of town life. Once a celebrated fire captain, renowned for his fearless approach to peril, he now found solace in the soft rustle of winter trees rather than in the clamor of human interaction. He ignored phone calls and refrained from responding to messages, even declining an invitation to a memorial service at the firehouse last summer, choosing instead to remain at home, splitting wood in solitude. However, when he opened the door and beheld what awaited him on the porch, that silence shattered. Titan stood in the snow, his flanks heaving from exertion, legs trembling yet steadfast. Draped across his back was a half-frozen boy, pale and limp, his head lolling forward. "Jesus," Jack grumbled as he stepped forward. Hey, what the hell?" He extended his hand toward the child, lifting him gently from the dog's back with a practiced grace. His large, calloused hands softened instinctively as he cradled Ethan against his chest. The boy's skin felt like ice, his flannel shirt drenched, lips tinged with blue. "Get inside," Jack commanded the dog, partly out of routine and partly in amazement at how the creature complied within the confines of the cabin. Jack moved swiftly, clearing the sofa with a sweep of his arm to lay Ethan down, wrapping him in the nearest thick wool blanket. He knelt to check his pulse, breathing, and pupil reaction. The routine returned to him like second nature. His hands moved with efficiency, reminiscent of the attempts he had made with his son during the rescue efforts that had come too late. Titan stood near the door, observing every motion. The room felt warm now, the heat from the cast-iron stove causing his frozen fur to begin steaming. Water pooled beneath him. "You're a damn miracle," Jack muttered, casting a glance toward the dog. "Where the hell did you come from?" He pulled back the blanket and scrutinized Ethan's arms for signs of more severe harm. That's when he noticed the wrists, where deep, angry welts marked the boy's skin, distinct rope marks, not fresh, several hours old at least, likely longer. These weren't just carelessly tied. No, this was deliberate, tight, cruel. Whoever had done this intended for the child to remain bound and silent. Something in Jack's chest tightened. He reached for a first aid kit tucked beneath the fireplace mantel, cleaned the skin with antiseptic, and then began to gently massage the boy's fingers to encourage circulation. Ethan flinched, barely a breath, a flicker of life. "You're okay, kid," Jack said softly. "You're safe now." He stood and turned to Titan, who had now sat down, one ear twitching, eyes fixed on Ethan. "I don't know where you came from," Jack said, "but you brought him here on purpose, didn't you?" Titan remained still, yet his amber gaze held steady. Jack let out a weary, incredulous laugh. "You actually carried him out there through that storm." He crouched beside the dog and up close. Titan looked even worse, ribs beginning to show beneath wet fur, a visible limp, old scars matted by grime and ice. Yet there was something in the dog's posture, and the solemn focus of his gaze, that told Jack this was no ordinary stray. "You're one of those canines, Soph, aren't you?" he murmured. "A working dog, a partner." Titan let out a low, brief exhale, neither a whine nor a full bark, but just enough to convey his thoughts. Jack stood, rubbing a hand down his beard as a memory floor at a missing child case from 3 years ago, a girl named Lucy Darnell. Similar rope marks were found 2 days after she disappeared, dumped near the highway, bruised but alive. No suspect was ever charged. The marks on her wrists looked almost identical to these, and something icy crept along Jack's spine. He turned back to Ethan, now wrapped in a second blanket. The boy's fingers twitched, then his lips parted. "Cold," he whispered, barely audible. "Hush," Jack murmured softly. "You're cozy now, just relax." The wind howled beyond the cabin walls, yet inside, warmth had finally returned after days of chill. Outside, the storm had calmed, but the forest lay shrouded in a thick white hush. Long fingers of mist curled around the tree trunks, while the pines stood still like solemn witnesses. However, within the cabin, the quiet felt uneasy, a silence that lingered after someone struggled to recall a painful memory too difficult to voice. Ethan lay bundled on the couch, the wool blankets piled around his small frame like a cocoon. His cheeks had regained some color, and his breath no longer rattled in his chest. He stared at the ceiling as if tracing invisible shapes there, his lips barely moving. Titan lay curled beside him, nose resting on his front paw, one ear always tilted toward the boy. The bond between them had formed fast, as if something unspoken had passed in those snow-covered woods. Jack Brennan gazed out the window with coffee in hand. He observed the trees. The old fire captain's stance was vigilant, yet his thoughts drifted elsewhere. Sleep had eluded him after Ethan's latest episode the night before. Jack had unearthed his box of case files from the hall closet, not exactly police records, but a collection of newspaper clippings, notes, and printouts he'd accumulated over the years regarding missing persons in the county. Some cases he had actively searched for, while others, like Lucy Darnell's, lingered in his mind long after. Now, another boy, another rope, another scar. He turned back toward the couch, where Ethan's eyes blinked slowly before his mouth parted. "There was a man," the boy whispered. Jack crouched beside him. "What kind of man?" Ethan's brow furrowed. With a furrowed brow he carried the scent of smoke, a constant reminder of the cigarettes he always smoked, even in the shed. Jack's jaw tightened. Did he even have a name? Ethan shook his head, revealing that he never spoke it, just referred to him as boy or quiet. He drove a green truck. Titan lifted his head, ears perked, body alert. The moment the words green truck escaped Ethan's lips, the German shepherd stood and made his way toward the window, tail rigidly surveying the edge of the woods. "Do you recall anything more?" Jack inquired. Ethan's lip trembled. "He sported a beard similar to yours, though more unkempt." He secured the door from the outside, chuckling as I let out a scream. Jack grabbed a notepad and meticulously jotted everything down. His handwriting remained blocky and crisp, reminiscent of the firehouse logs, though his hand quivered just a bit. Later that afternoon, while Ethan took another rest, Titan returned to his silent watch. Jack retrieved an old portable cassette recorder from his closet, not out of nostalgia, but because it still contained a few tapes from his firefighting Gaysfield interviews, reports, and even some from the sheriff's office when joint investigations intersected. He inserted a tape labeled March 11th Ridge Search Briefing and pressed play. A crackle of static filled the air before a voice emerged. "This is Sheriff Danner. Case brief. Still no sign of the canine, presumed dead after vehicle impact. Handler deceased on scene. German Shepherd registered as Titan declared unrecoverable. Jack looked up just in time to see Titan rise abruptly. The dog stood frozen, shoulders tense, and then a low, guttural growl began deep in his throat. It wasn't a growl of fear. It was one of recognition. Titan, Jack murmured, but the dog remained unresponsive, fixated on the cassette deck, his body rigid as if electrified. Moments later, he emitted a brief, high-pitched whimper and retreated a step. "You know that voice, don't you?" Jack whispered as Titan paced in a tight circle, the scar on his flank twitching. Jack turned off the recorder, sitting still and staring at the old tape. Sheriff Danner had declared Titan dead, not retired, not transferred, but dead. And yet, here stood the dog alive, injured, and carrying a boy to safety through a storm. What else had the sheriff lied about? He pulled the file box closer and retrieved the photo from Lucy Darnell's case. Jack compared the bruising patterns on Lucy's arms to what he had seen on Ethan. The similarities were chilling. Some not impressions, same directional bruising. Whoever had taken Ethan had used the same method. Meanwhile, Ethan stirred from the couch, sweat beading on his forehead. He tossed under the blankets and whimpered. Titan immediately padded over and placed his muzzle gently on the boy's chest. Ethan's breathing slowed, and he curled instinctively toward the dog from the side room. Jack observed them both. Whatever had transpired in the woods, Titan had remained steadfast, fighting to bring Ethan back, not as a mere pet, nor out of instinct, but out of a sense of duty, the kind instilled in canine officers, even when the world had turned its back on them. As night began to descend, Jack switched on the front porch light, illuminating the faint lavender glow of the sky beneath the heavy clouds. No footprints, no headlights along the trail, just trees, just silence. Yet, beneath that silence, Jack understood there were old lies hidden beneath the snow, along with one scarred dog determined to keep them from remaining buried. The fog arrived early that morning, curling in heavy coils through the evergreens of Ridge Hollow like specters returning to haunt the living. It blanketed the old logging trail in a thick silence, swallowing the crunch of boots and the low, steady breath of a dog on alert. Titan moved ahead with quiet precision, his nose low to the ground, every muscle coiled beneath his black and tan coat. His tail was stiff, not wagging. This wasn't a walk. It was a mission. Behind him, Jack Brennan followed the beam of his flashlight as it sliced through the pale mist. He wore his old fire department jacket, now faded and fraying at the cuffs, and carried an axe at his hip, not for protection, but to clear branches. Yet, a part of him appreciated the weight, feeling less exposed. They were retracing Titan's path from the night he found Ethan, after the boy had mentioned the green truck in the shed. Jack had let Titan sniff the boy's blanket again, and without hesitation, the German Shepherd had turned toward the eastern woods, tail high and steps swift. An hour later, Titan stopped. Jack squinted through the fog and saw up ahead, half buried in the snow, a collapsed wooden structure. It might have once been a hunting shed, but now it leaned at a dangerous angle. Planks twisted by decay and time. Titan scratched at the earth by the entrance, then released a brief, piercing bark. Jack knelt beside him, gently sweeping aside a mound of snow that lay beneath the frost. A blood stain spread across the dirt floor, a brownish red mark that was unmistakably human. Beside it lay frayed rope and a scrap of fabric, a child-sized cloth napkin, adorned with delicate stitching. Jack flipped it in his glove, muttering that this wasn't random. He pulled out his phone, snapped several photos, and then dialed Eliza. Moore answered on the second ring. Officer Moore was in her early 30s, exuding a commanding presence that didn't depend on volume. She stood just over 5'9", lean and well-trained, with dark curls typically pulled into a tight bun beneath her patrol cap. Her hazel eyes were sharp, always watching, always calculating. Tessa was among the rare officers in Brookage County who had dared to challenge authority on multiple occasions, and she had faced the consequences. She reached Jack's cabin an hour later, her boots still caked in mud, her expression tight with tension. "Are you certain the boy was here?" she inquired after Jack revealed the photos. "Yes." Titan guided me directly to it. "Blood, rope, and this." He handed her the napkin. "MJ," she murmured, "I've seen the stitching before. Carla Jean, she filed a missing persons report 2 months ago for her nephew Micah. I thought that case was closed." Jack said it was. Tessa replied bitterly. "Sheriff Danner said it was a custody dispute, not a real abduction. But this changes things." She turned serious. "But if we go forward with this, we need more than just suspicion, especially because—" She stopped because of who Jack pressed. She hesitated. "Then Victor Hudson." Jack felt a chill not from the air. Victor Hudson was a name people in Brookage said with either reverence or fear, a local businessman who made millions in timber and construction. Victor was large in both build and influence, mid-50s, always in a tailored coat, clean-shaven with bright white teeth, and a salesman's handshake. He owed Jack generously to the police department and even funded the sheriff's re-election campaign, but rumors clung to him about how he treated his workers, about women gone missing near job sites. Nothing ever lingered. Tessa softened her tone. "Micah's aunt mentioned that Gary's truck was spotted close to their trailer on the night the boy disappeared, a green Chevy with a dented rear fender. However, Danner quickly dismissed it, claiming there was no evidence." "Now with rope and blood involved," Jack remarked, and Tessa nodded, acknowledging that this creates a dilemma. A beat of silence lingered before she turned her gaze to Titan. "How is it he's still alive?" Jack shrugged. "You ever seen a canine like him?" "No," she admitted. "And if the sheriff knew he was alive?" "He will," Jack interjected. But Tessa wasn't ready to confront him just yet. Instead, she opted for a detour. That night, after driving back into town, Tessa parked her cruiser on a quiet side street and stepped into a dim cafe near the bus depot. In the far corner, a woman in a heavy-knit sweater and a navy beanie was typing on a battered laptop. Nina Graves possessed a demeanor that blended seamlessly into her surroundings. A woman in her early 40s who didn't seek the spotlight. Slender figure, chestnut eyes framed by wire-frame glasses, her voice gentle like the whisper of turning pages. Yet she had once been a reporter for the Columbia Tribune and had come close to uncovering a trafficking ring linked to law enforcement until intimidation forced her into freelance journalism. "Tessa," Nina acknowledged without raising her gaze. "If you're here, something's wrong." Tessa settled into the seat across from her. "You still have your source in Ashe County?" Nina raised an eyebrow. "It depends. I think it's happening here," Tessa mentioned, or at least it was she who presented the facts. Ethan tightened the shed, the initials, the sheriff's silence, and Hudson's connection. Nina remained silent, her fingers dancing over the keyboard as she absorbed the conversation. "I'll dig," she finally declared. "But if Hudson's in the mix, we'll need more than just rope and whispers." "I'll get it," Tessa said as she left. Nina called out, "Watch your six." Tessa remained silent, her jaw clenched, as she stepped into the enveloping fog. Snow fell once more, silent and thick, silencing the world around her until only the gentle creaking of branches in the wind and the steadied breathing of slumber within the cabin could be heard. The fire had dwindled to a cozy bit of coals, casting a soft orange glow across the pine walls. Ethan lay curled beneath a heavy wool blanket on the improvised cot. Jack had constructed a space beside the hearth, where his small frame had softened with each passing night. Yet there remained fleeting moments when his fingers would twitch, reaching out for something or someone that was no longer present. Titan rested alongside him, one paw extended beneath the boy's hand. The dog's ears, though relaxed in repose, twitched at the faintest sound of vigilant guardian even in sleep. Jack in the kitchen corner sat in a creaky wooden chair sipping stale coffee from a chipped mug. He hadn't shaved in 3 days. His graying beard had begun to catch the flicker of fire light, making him look older than his 52 years. Jack Brennan had once led search and rescue operations through some of the harshest terrain in Colorado, but after losing his son in a cabin fire 6 winters ago, a fire he couldn't reach in time. He had retreated from the world, his shoulders once proud and upright, now hunched slightly as if bowed by grief too long. Carried, yet something about Ethan and Titan's silent determination had stirred a flicker of purpose again. It was just past midnight when the dog stirred, first a low growl, then suddenly Titan was on his feet, fur bristling, body rigid. He stepped forward, placing himself between the door and Ethan, and let out a sound that wasn't quite a bark, more like a warning torn from the depths of his chest. Jack stood immediately, grabbing the old axe beside the hearth, heart pounding outside. Snow crackled underfoot. A shadow moved past the front window, tall, broad-shouldered, wrapped in a dark coat. Whoever it was made no effort to knock. Titan lunged toward the door, snarling, now teeth bared. Jack reached for the knob and yanked the door open. The figure was already turning, startled by the dog's growl. Under the moonlight, Jack caught only a fleeting glimpse of a black ski mask, gloved hands, and boots as they slipped away from Prince and headed toward the trees. The figure darted away, stumbling briefly before disappearing among the trees. Titan lunged forward but halted just before the threshold, growling into the night. Snow swirled into the room like an unwelcome specter, prompting Jack to swiftly shut the door, securing it with the iron bar. Ethan stirred awake amidst the disturbance, his eyes wide and glistening. "That sound? He's back," he murmured. "Who?" Jack inquired softly. "The man with the smoke smell. You always wore gloves." "Did he hurt you?" Ethan paused, then shook his head. "Not me, but there was a girl." Jack settled beside him. "Tell me about her." "She had braids," Ethan replied, curling deeper under the blanket. "She cried when they put her in the red car. They made her wear a blindfold. I never saw her again after that day." "Do you recall her name?" Ethan bit his lip, deep in thought. "I believe it was Maddie, or maybe May. When I was younger, I was always filled with fear." Jack leaned in softly, placing his hand on Titan's shoulder. The dog remained fixated on the door, every muscle tense and ready. The following morning brought a chill to the air. The snow lay thicker, and the world beyond the cabin seemed to hold its breath as Ethan slept peacefully. Jack grabbed his old coat and stepped outside with Titan. The trail of footprints from the night before had already begun to fade, half swallowed by the wind, but what caught Jack's attention was something else, something he hadn't noticed before. A faint glint of metal embedded in the trunk of the tallest pine near the front porch. He walked toward it, brushing off snow there. Almost perfectly hidden by a knothole was a tiny camera, weatherproof, battery-powered, and well secured. Its lens was pointed directly at the cabin it had been recording. Jack removed it with care and brought it inside. He booted up the old laptop that had survived his self-imposed exile. The camera had an internal memory card. It took a few minutes, but he managed to extract the footage. There, in silent black and white, he saw the snow-covered clearing, the stillness of the trees. Then, 2 nights prior, a shape appeared at the edge of the frame, a pickup truck, dark green, slightly dented on the passenger side. Victor Hudson's. The timestamp on the footage confirmed it. 48 hours ago, the same night, Ethan had nightmares so violent that Titan had refused to leave his side. Jack leaned back in his chair, his breath caught between disbelief and fury. Why would Victor Hudson come out here? He muttered aloud. Titan, lying nearby, growled softly as if answering. Jack opened his notebook, jotted down the time codes, and copied the footage to a USB drive. He had reservations about cloud storage. Not anymore. He sent a message to Eliza. "Footage found. Hudson's truck confirmed. Me tonight." The reply came within minutes. "Yes, keep Ethan safe." As the day wore on, Ethan seemed unusually quiet during lunch. He poked at his food but barely ate. Titan stayed close, even nuzzling the boy once gently. Then, as Jack cleared the dishes, Ethan spoke. "I heard the moon last night," he said. Jack paused, his brow furrowing. "What do you mean?" It echoed within me, a silent alarm signaling that something ominous loomed on the horizon. Jack lowered himself to the child's height, assuring him, "Nothing will happen to you while you're here, kiddo. Not while I'm breathing, and definitely not while Titan is watching." The dog raised his head, ears alert as if in quiet understanding. The frost lingered at dawn, and an unusual tension hung in the air, a sharp metallic tang that Titan appeared to perceive before any human. He wandered restlessly near the window. His nose twitched, eyes fixed on the distant tree line as if something unseen lurked within the cabin. The air was heavy with a sense of urgency. Jack leaned over the old dining table, cluttered with maps, photographs, and scribbled notes. Across from him sat Tessa Moore, her sandy blonde hair tied back in a no-nonsense braid. At 35, she was tall and weary with sharp eyes and a voice that commanded attention. Despite the exhaustion shadowing her face, she carried herself with the steel of someone who had fought too long to give up now. The badge on her coat was hidden, off-duty and unofficial, yet she was fully in charge. Next to her was Nina Graves, the freelance journalist who had once uncovered a trafficking ring in neighboring Summit County, only to find her apartment broken into and her name quietly smeared in media circles. In her early 40s, Nina had close-cropped black curls, white-set brown eyes, and an angular jaw. She wore thrift store boots, a threadbare parka, and a messenger bag covered in sewn patches of resistance slogans. Her demeanor was sharp, somewhat wary, yet profoundly dedicated. Ethan settled into a chair positioned near the fire, his knees drawn up. One hand rested on Titan's back while the other cradled a small voice recorder, which Tessa had gently passed to him. "You don't have to talk if you don't want to," she reassured him. Ethan nodded slowly, his voice barely a whisper at first. It was always night when he arrived. I think he preferred it that way. Nina clicked her pen. "Take your time, darling." He carried the scent of ash, a lingering fire that refused to extinguish. Ethan's gaze was unfocused, lost in the depths of memory. He used to hum softly while tying the ropes, a slow rhythm that paralyzed me in place, yet the sound echoed in my mind. Jack shared a glance with Eliza, who delicately nudged a digital recorder closer. "Is there anything else you recall about his voice?" she asked. Ethan's eyes fell to the ground. "It's on that tape, the one from the sheriff's office. I heard it. It was him." Nina leaned in, examining the tape from the old training files. Jack nodded, recalling the one featuring Titan's former handler, Alan Kerr. Titan, lying flat at Ethan's feet, suddenly lifted his head. Tessa pulled out a compact speaker and connected it to her phone. "Let's try it," she said, playing the segment again. It was tiny and grainy. A man spoke softly, guiding a dog through training drills. When an unexpected moment occurred, another male voice interjected with a firm command, "Pull tighter. He doesn't move until I say." Ethan flinched, while Titan stood up, ears perked and growling. Ethan's voice trembled as he said, "That's him." Tessa switched off the speaker, and silence fell like a dropped curtain. Nina whispered, "Victor Hudson." Tessa acknowledged that the clip was never meant to see the light of day. It was part of Alan Kerr's training footage, salvaged from the field before his untimely demise. Yet, someone had tampered with the archive, leading to this mislabeling. Nina rose, capturing images of Ethan's healing rope burns, the stitched cuts on his wrist, and the embroidered cloth that bore the child's name. Each click of the shutter felt like a strike against the shroud that had concealed this truth. Outside, the snow began to fall once more. By midday, Nina found herself in the cabin's back room, her laptop perched on her knees, her fingers dancing across the keys as she meticulously crafted the headline carefully hidden among the pines. "The boy, the dog, and the millionaire who abandoned them." She faded into the background. Ethan's expression concealed his identity, referencing sources without attribution, while Eliza's badge number was omitted. Jack's name has been removed, but she provided the audio of the voice. The intertwined threads of rope ignited the reports of missing children that never reached the courtroom. She hit publish, then share, and the digital realm exploded of views within an hour, comments flooding in, screenshots circulating on activist forums, inquiries directed at Victor Hudson's corporate sponsors. Meanwhile, within the confines of the cabin, Titan stayed close to Ethan, never straying more than 5 minutes since their first encounter. As the wind howled outside, he suddenly stood alert, nose in the air and tail stiff. "What is it, boy?" Jack asked, as Titan moved toward the door, sniffing the scene. Jack followed outside, where a bloodied collar was pinned to the cabin's porch by a hunting knife. The tag read, "Care Care," and Jack yanked it down, his jaw tight. Tessa stepped up beside him. "It's Alan's." It was meant to be evidence. Jack glanced at her. "You mentioned that Sheriff Danner took care of the transfer of Alan's body." Tessa nodded. "And the evidence. And now this appears on my porch." Nina emerged from behind them, phone in hand. "You might want to take a look at this." She presented the feed where Sheriff Danner's office had recently shared a brief statement online. It read, "Nina Graves is fabricating documents in an attempt to damage the reputation of a private citizen. An internal investigation is underway." Tessa whispered a curse. "They're attempting to silence us once more. We refuse to remain quiet." Jack remarked with unease and observed the snow descend. "He's angry," he murmured. "The man with smoke is aware." Titan lay beside him once more, but this time his head was raised, his eyes locked on the door, not growling, just waiting. The snow had thickened by dawn, cascading in heavy, silent sheets that cloaked the forest in a hush, like a breath held before a scream. The mountains near Timberline Ridge stood as silent sentinels, hiding more than mere secrets beneath their icy facade. The trees murmured softly, burdened by the anticipation of what lay ahead. Jack pulled his scarf tighter as he crouched next to the delicate trace of tire tracks just beyond the clearing. "He was here," he murmured to himself, glancing sideways. Titan dipped his nose into the snow, inhaling in quick, measured breaths. The golden retriever, once presumed lifeless, now ignited with an unyielding spirit. His thick, honey-colored coat bristled as he followed the scent, his body gliding low to the ground with a mastery born of memory and instinct. They ventured deeper into the woods, where Victor Hudson, a millionaire philanthropist by name but a predator by nature, had uncovered their investigation. 3 days prior, when LA's article gained widespread attention, Victor disappeared, severing connections and obliterating documents. Departing, a solitary trace remained, a charred truck at the periphery of rock pine forest, accompanied by the subtle aroma of motor oil permeating the snow. Jack stood, surveying the expanse before him. "You sure, boy?" Titan responded with a single bark before darting into the denser woods. Jack pursued, clutching the flashlight and radio secured to his belt, his breath escaping in invisible puffs. His boots crunched through the fresh powder, the wind nipping at his coat. Meanwhile, 50 miles away in the town of Stillwater, Sheriff Danner stood before a microphone inside a press conference tent that had been hastily erected beside the courthouse at 61. Danner sported his silver hair cut short, and his expression was more rigid. His jaw moved subtly as he leaned in. "There is no verified evidence that Mr. Victor Hudson committed any crime," he stated, his voice steady. "Even the so-called confession from a minor with known trauma does not constitute proof. We urge the public not to fall victim to media manipulation." Whispers filled the air as cameras captured the scene. Amidst the throng stood Marcy Hahn, a state-level legal observer, her thick glasses perched on her nose and a clipboard clutched tightly in her hands. A permanent frown etched into her pale face. She recorded each statement with an unwavering demeanor. To her left, Lieutenant Jerome Flannery, a stocky man in his mid-40s with a mustache as thick as a broom, exuded an air of skepticism. His posture suggested a lifetime spent in bureaucracy, as Danner's voice resonated Jack, asserting that the boy Ethan had not provided credible information. He was abruptly interrupted by a woman's voice declaring, "I have the tapes." Every gaze shifted. Nina Graves moved ahead, camera in hand, accompanied by Tessa Moore and 3 other officers from the state's Child Protection Division. Danner's smile flickered. This was not the moment. Tessa stepped around him. "Your time has come to an end, Sheriff. Now it's our turn." The space burst forth once more into the woods. Jack and Titan pressed onward, crossing the second ridge where the air grew colder. breath crystallizing into frost. The wind carried a sharper edge, reminiscent of ice cracking underfoot. Suddenly Titan halted. They had arrived at a narrow ravine. Concealed beneath a stone overhang and tangled brush lay a heavy metal grate, its surface old and rusted yet still secured. Titan emitted a low growl as Jack knelt, clearing away the snow to uncover a worn handle, partially frozen in place. "Help me out here," he murmured, but Titan had already begun to dig at the ice. 10 minutes later, they managed to pry it open. Beneath lay a tunnel they entered cautiously. The tunnel was cramped, lined with damp concrete and wires that pulsed faintly with emergency lighting. It descended deeper, the air growing stale, metallic like blood and rust. Titan led the way without a moment's pause, as they rounded the corner and discovered a sturdy door slightly ajar. Inside, 3 children awaited, 2 girls and 1 boy. Ground with practiced precision, a blend of memory and instinct, they were deep into the woods now. Victor Hudson, a millionaire philanthropist by title, Truth's investigation had been uncovered by Predator 3 days prior. The instant Ellie's article gained traction, Victor disappeared, severing connections and obliterating files, leaving only a solitary trace, a charred truck at the periphery of rock pine forest, and the subtle aroma of motor oil embedded in the snow. Jack stood, surveying the landscape. "You sure, boy?" Titan barked once before darting into the dense woods. Jack followed, clutching the flashlight and radio secured to his belt, his breath manifesting in visible puffs. His boots crunched through the untouched snow, the wind nipping at his coat. Meanwhile, 50 miles away in the town of Stillwater, Sheriff Danner positioned himself in front of a microphone within a press conference tent quickly assembled next to the courthouse at 61. Danner wore his silver hair close-cropped, his expression taut. His jaw worked slightly as he leaned forward. "There is no verified evidence that Mr. Victor Hudson committed any crime," he stated, his voice steady. "Even the so-called confession from a minor with known trauma does not constitute proof. We ask the public not to fall victim to media manipulation." Whispers filled the air, shutters snapped as the throng gathered. Marcy Hahn, a state-level legal observer, sports thick glasses, a clipboard in hand and a permanent frown etched into her pale face. She recorded each phrase with an air of detachment. To her left stood Lieutenant Jerome Flannery, a stocky man in his mid-40s, sporting a mustache as thick as a broom and a posture that exuded the essence of a lifelong bureaucrat. He appeared skeptical as Danner's voice persisted. "The boy Ethan has not provided credible." He was interrupted by a woman's voice. "I have the tapes." Every gaze shifted. Nina Graves moved ahead, camera in hand, accompanied by Tessa Moore and 3 other officers from the state's Child Protection Division. Danner's smile faltered. This was not the moment. Tessa brushed past him, asserting, "You've had your time, Sheriff. It's now in our hands." The space burst forth once more into the woods. Jack and Titan pressed onward, crossing the second ridge where the air turned frigid, breath crystallizing into frost. The wind carried a sharpness, reminiscent of ice cracking underfoot. Suddenly Titan halted. They had arrived at a narrow ravine. Nestled beneath a stone overhang and tangled brush lay a heavy metal grate, its surface old and rusted yet still secured. Titan emitted a low growl as Jack knelt, clearing away the snow to uncover a handle, worn and partially frozen in place. "Give me a hand here," he murmured, but Titan had already started to scrape at the ice. 10 minutes later, they managed to pry it open. Beneath it lay a tunnel, which they entered cautiously. The tunnel was cramped, lined with damp concrete and wires that pulsed faintly with emergency lighting. It descended deeper, the air growing stale, metallic, reminiscent of blood and rust. Titan led the way without a moment's pause, rounding a corner to discover a heavy door slightly ajar. Inside, 3 children awaited, 2 girls and a boy, all under the age of 10. One girl sported a bandaged arm, while the boy bore bruises along one side of his face. Yet, despite their injuries, all 3 gazed at Titan as if he were a figure conjured from a dream. Suddenly, a man's voice crackled to life from the radio. "Jack, where are you?" Jack grabbed the mic, Corday Jackson hand. 41.2 North, 75.6 West Underground holding Psych 3 miners found send backup and medics immediately. But Titan hadn't moved. He was standing at a shelf in the corner. On it was a blood-stained cloth. He sniffed it once, then recoiled, whining, pacing, scratching at the concrete. Jack approached carefully, lifting the cloth embroidered on one corner where the initials A.K. Alan Kerr. He whispered. Titan growled again, then whimpered. The sound was broken, raw. Jack knelt beside him, hand resting on his fur. "You remember, don't you?" Titan turned his eyes to Jack. They shimmered. "He doesn't just save the living." Jack murmured his search for the lost. By the time backup arrived, the children were wrapped in blankets, with Titan curled protectively around them. Jack stood watch like a sentinel of old. Snow began to fall again above them, concealing their footsteps, but not their truth. Dictor Hudson was still missing, yet his secrets lingered. The frost clung to the lower shadows of the Cascade Hills, but the air now held a different weight, softer, as if the land itself had exhaled. Snow melted into rivulets that whispered along the mossy stones, and the trees, once brittle with ice, now glistened with newborn buds. The thaw had arrived, not just for the forest, but for the hearts that had long endured winter's silence. Atop the ridge, gazing down at the tranquil waters below, a group of individuals assembled before the aged municipal courthouse. The once imposing gray stone structure now bore a simple banner: "Justice for the lost, honor for the brave." A modest crowd encircled a raised platform, their breath visible in the crisp morning air, eyes locked on the golden figure at the center. Titan stood tall, his vest gleaming, ears attentive, surveying the gathering with a serene gravity at his side. Ethan donned a neatly pressed blue jacket that hung a bit loosely on his slender build. His hair had grown longer, and his cheeks appeared fuller. He stood with a calm demeanor, one hand gently resting on Titan's sturdy neck. The boy's eyes reflected a newfound depth, a steadiness that seemed to have taken root within him. The mayor of Stillwater, Margaret Lane, a dignified woman in her late 50s with silver-streaked auburn hair and a voice that resonated like a fresh breeze, approached the microphone. Her gray suit embraced her tall frame with a touch of refined simplicity. Today, she commenced with a tribute not solely to bravery but to resilience, not merely to justice, but to the voices that steadfastly refused to be silenced. She turned to Titan, "This dog, this spirit, who has guided us not only through snow and silence, but also through fear. He is more than just a hero. He stands as a testament to what loyalty and love embody when freely given." An enthusiastic wave of applause surged through the assembly. Beyond the throng, Tessa Morse stood alongside Nina Graves and Jack Brennan. Clad in her uniform, her badge now shone brightly with the state seal, marking her promotion to the head of the newly established Child Protection and Rescue Task Force. Ellie, clad in her familiar brown coat and jeans, held her well-used notepad, but today it served a different purpose. She was there to observe. Jack, dressed in his old firefighter jacket with the sleeves rolled back, had his hands resting casually in his pockets. His typically weathered and quiet demeanor softened as he gazed at Ethan. Though he remained a soldier of grief, he had also embraced a new role, that of a father. Later that afternoon, under gentler skies, a smaller group gathered before a modest gravestone tucked beneath a sycamore tree on the edge of Cascade Heaven's property. The earth had recently been disturbed, and the wooden marker displayed a simple inscription. Alan Kerr, the K-9 officer, protector, and friend, approached slowly. His steps were deliberate, his breath steady. He held something in his mouth, a metal tag, scuffed and bent, but unmistakable. The old K-9 badge from his days with Officer Kerr. With care only a creature who remembers can summon, he placed it among the flowers resting at the base of the stone: snowdrops, crocuses, and a single white tulip behind him. Ethan moved closer, crouching next to Titan. The boy pressed his forehead softly against the dog's head, his hand cradling Titan's ear. "We won't let anyone forget again," he whispered. Promise me. Titan let out a gentle whine, not from pain but from a place of remembrance, a silent promise echoing in the stillness. That evening, the lights of Cascade Haven shimmered softly through the pine trees. The center, once an abandoned ranger station, had been revitalized. Wooden signs indicated the newly constructed cabin zone for animal rescues, another for children in crisis, and yet another for joint therapy and education. The aroma of pine wood and hope hung in the air within the main cabin. Tessa was assisting a small girl named Marabelle, no more than 6, with wide green eyes and tangled dark curls, in feeding a limping tabby cat named Dusty. Marabelle was shy, barely speaking, but she followed Tessa like a shadow. Her file indicated she had been found in an abandoned trailer in North Creek, with no parents coming forward. Tessa handed her a spoon with gentle hands. "He only eats if you talk to him while he eats," she said, not untruthfully. Marabelle nodded, barely above a breath, and whispered, "Good kitty," in the background. Nina was arranging a cozy reading circle for the older kids. A chalkboard on the wall displayed a hand-drawn logo, and voices filled the air, discussing the outreach program she and Jack had initiated to help survivors share their stories safely, anonymously, and when they felt ready to speak out loud. That night, as the fire crackled in the hearth and Titan dozed near Ethan's feet, Jack walked the perimeter of the property with a flashlight. He paused now and then, not out of fear, but from habit or routine he was reluctant to abandon. He discovered Tessa seated on the porch steps, sipping hot cider from a chipped mug. "He's sleeping already?" she inquired. "Out like a light. He's been running around with that goofy little pup all afternoon," she smiled. "He's healing. We are too," Jack said softly. The porch light flickered once before finding its steadiness. The wind had calmed, and the snow had ceased its descent, revealing something extraordinary, the hush of safety. For a moment, they sat in silence, a quiet that stemmed not from absence, but from a profound presence. Titan remained still beside the boy who had saved him just as much as he had saved the boy. The boy lifted his head, listening not for danger but for the tranquility that enveloped them. The door creaked slightly, and Ethan emerged, rubbing his eyes. "Jack?" "Yeah, buddy. Can Titan sleep in my room tonight?" Jack smiled, and a soft laughter echoed in the background. A girl reads aloud as a dog barks joyfully nearby, while a cat knocks over a can of treats. The heart of the place thrummed with vitality, as spring finally unveiled its embrace. Occasionally, the most profound wonders don a coat of fur and tread softly on for paws across the winter's blanket. In the stillness, even the darker corners of harshness lingered. Titan revealed that true courage often whispers rather than shouts, manifesting in steadfast loyalty, profound gazes, and a heart eager to mend the broken. The events in Cascade transcended mere rescue. They served as a profound awakening, a testament that even in our bleakest moments, a helper, a healer, and a hero can emerge. In our own journeys, we may overlook the angels surrounding us. They may lack wings, appearing instead with dirt, fur, or scars. Yet, they are present, guiding, protecting, and loving us, just as Titan did. If this narrative resonates with you, consider sharing it with someone who believes in the power of second chances. Share your thoughts below if you feel that the divine still operates in surprising ways, and if you trust in the healing power of family and faith. Write Amen in the comments. May blessings be upon you and your loved ones, and may we all become a miracle for someone else, just as Titan became for Athens. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Kindred Creatures, because sometimes it takes a creature to remind us of our humanity.